You need to be familiar with the basics of numerology to use this system effectively. The first numerology table divides the letters of the alphabet into 9 divisions. This technique dates back historically to the ancient Near East. It is famed in the West in modern numerology, where it is known as the Pythagorean table. It is effectively a reduction table for the numerological value of the letters. You reduce 1000 to 100, and then 100 to 10, and then 10 to 1, and you stack them all under one column. Here is a table that shows the values before they were reduced. As the value 1, A has the value 1 because A is the first letter of the alphabet. These values are for the English language only. If you have another alphabet whose first letter is E, then E would be 1. What to do after you hit 10? Well, you can do one of 2 things. The first is you can go from 10 to 20, then 30, and when you hit 90, go to 100. We call this the large range table. The large range table is what most people associate with the Hebrew numerology or gematria, and the reduction table of 9 divisions is what people often associate with English numerology. Truthfully, a Hebrew alphabet reduction table exists, and it is known in Hebrew as Ekbekar. The second thing you can do is to progress from 10 to 11, then 12, then 13. We call this the small range table. The small and large range tables for the English exist, but few people seem to accept them or use them. Instead, many occultists prefer to either use the reduction table or try to overlay the English on Hebrew, even though they are not from the same language family tree. With this out of the way, let's start with how to actually do a complete reading. The first step in the reading is to formulate the question. It is probably the most important step, since the answer depends on the exact letters of the question. Make sure your mind is clear. It is very hard to form words when your mind is distracted by a million things, or you are emotionally stressed. Make sure you spelled everything correctly. Believe it or not, I have seen readings done with spelling errors. Make sure you are very specific about what you really want to know. Make sure you identify all the variables precisely. Questions like, "What am I thinking?" will fail. For one thing, the I in this question is anonymous. You need to insert your name for the reading to apply to you. The question as framed is also time nebulous. It doesn't know that you mean now. Even more so, when is now? Keep everything clear in the question, and you will get clear answers. Finally, make sure to double check your math and letters if you are doing this by hand. Here is a good question to start with. Did God create the world? First step is to create a table of 9 columns. It doesn't matter how many letters there are in your question. You have to divide it along the 9 columns. Next, insert the letters of the questions into this grid. If your question is long, you want to double check to make sure you didn't miss a letter here or there. Going with our example, we now have the first table. You will notice that some letters repeat throughout the question. We only want each letter once for this next step. Create another 9-column table and go through the letters again. If you come across the same letter twice, skip it and proceed to the next one. Your answer table will look like the second table below the first. We're going to use the table of small range values now. Insert beside each letter its small range value. Your answer table should look like this, the second table below. We skipped over repeating letters when creating this table, but those repeated letters have a purpose and a value. What we need to do is figure out how many times do these letters appear in the 9 columns. D in the first column has a value of 1. D in the second column has a value. If you have 2 D's in the 5th column, then their total value would be 10. In our example question, the letter D appears 4 times in the sentence. The total value of D would be D equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 6. The letter W appears only once, and that has the value 7. For this next step, we're going to go through each letter that appears in the table. We will figure out its total column value and then insert it underneath the answer table. The letter D has the total sum of 12. We put that underneath the letter D in the answer table. When we are done, the answer table will look like this, the lower grid. We are halfway through the process now. The next step involves adding the number beside each letter in the parenthesis with the number underneath. If it exceeds 26, continue to subtract the number of letters in the alphabet, that is, 26, until you are left with a number equal to or less than 26. For example, R has the value 18 in the parenthesis, and the number beneath it in the table is also 17. The result is 18 plus 17, 26, equals 9. Our answer table now looks like this, the top grid. We don't need the letters from the question anymore. Let's just delete them from the answer table, the bottom grid. Remember, we said that Ziraja is a 3-step process. The first part of the process is to convert the letters of the question into numbers and apply a formula to them. We just did that. The next stage of the process is to convert the resulting numbers back into letters. The third stage is to form the letters. We are in the second stage now. We need to take those values and convert them back into letters. We're going to use the table of small range values once again. Looking at the table, we see that the letter that corresponds to 16 is P. The letter that corresponds to 11 is K. Let's put those letters above the numbers in the answer table. Now we are almost done. We don't need those numbers anymore either. We already have the primary answer letters, so let's delete them. More often than not, the answer table isn't sufficient enough to generate the answer. That is why we supplement them with letters from the reduction table. The first answer letter is P. Looking at the reduction table, we find the letters G and Y in the same column. Take those letters and put them under the letter P in parentheses. Continue to fill the answer table along the same lines. The final answer table would look as follows. It's now time to form the answer to our question. You'll notice that you have a grouping of letters, P with G and Y in parentheses, K with B and T, K with B and T, all the way to M with D and V in parentheses. The rules when forming letters are as follows. Try and use the primary letter or the letters in the blue row first. You can use one letter for each grouping only once. Once you use a letter from a grouping, the whole grouping ceases to be valuable to you. You need to try and use as many letters as possible in formation of your answer. So if you have P with G and Y in parentheses,